Hey guys, Mike from Wrestling Then and Now. Thanks so much for checking out the Roadblock clips. To order your own Roadblock figure, you can email the man himself at theroadblock49 at gmail.com. Again, that's theroadblock49 at gmail.com. Pick up your figure. Thanks so much for checking out the clips. Hope you enjoy them.
Right time, right place, right time. So I got a little bit of exposure. And so what happened was I stayed there, like I said, for about 4 or 5, 6, not even 6 months, maybe 5 months. And I ended up going to Puerto Rico. I did a couple independents with Larry. And I ended up going to Puerto Rico and I ended up wrestling there for about 3, 6 months. And I ended up, meeting people and, it's not, you don't burn any bridges when you're in the wrestling business. You know what I mean? Because to
Sure.
leave somewhere tomorrow, you know what I mean? And so it ended up hooking me up with Victor Jovica, who was, he had a connection with Japan, and he asked me if I wanted to go to Japan. And I said, sure. And he said, there's a new company opening up. It's called SWS. And I said, sure. So he booked me there, and I went over there, and believe it or not, there was like, I don't know, 5 other independent, wrestlers. But then they had a crew of WWE, WWF wrestlers at the time go there and wrestle for the company. It was a brand new company. Tinru was running it, but it
Okay.
was a billionaire Japanese guy that owned a glass company eyeglass company. He was the backer. And so, anyways, I ended up getting a contract there for 6 months. And I ended up going there for 6 months. And I was the only gaijin, the only foreigner there other than the WWE, WWF at the time again. And, I met some of the guys as they came. And I met Randy Savage.
Okay.
And when I met Randy Savage, I explained to him my situation that I jumped in the ring at the one of their TV tapings in Rochester. I said, Vince ain't never going to let me work for him. He says, oh, brother, don't worry. Vince don't care about that. He's all about the money. I said, well, okay. So about 3, 4 months later, I ended up going home. And it just happened to be time and again, they were here in town and it was TV taping and Vince McMahon and they were here, everybody, live TV.
Right.
Walking around and there's Macho. He says, hey, Block, what's going on? You're home, huh? I said, yeah, I just got home about 2 weeks ago. And he says, good, let me bring you and introduce you to Vince.
Okay.
That's what I said. Okay, beautiful. Here's going to be a break for me.
It's Macho
And,
Man. Yeah.
you know,
What more could you want than that? Yeah. But
yeah, that's beautiful. So I'm
something tells me there's a but.
door. Vince comes to the door, and right next to his door is Pat Patterson's room, and they both come like time work. I mean, I don't know how you want. They both came at the door at the same time, opened up, clockwork, and they look at each other, and they look at me, and they look at Randy, and Randy says, "Vince, you know who this guy is?" Figuring that Randy would put me over, saying, "Hey, he just got back from Japan. He
Right.
was here for 6 months. Maybe you give him a dark match or something." And Vince looked at Pat, and Pat looked at Vince, and they looked at each other, and they look at me, and they go, "No, we don't know who he is. How will we know who he is?" Randy said, "This is the guy that jumped in the ring,
Oh, he buried you.
buried me,
Oh,
buried me." So they look at each other, Pat and Vince, and they go back in their rooms, close their doors, and that was it. Never heard another thing. So then, I kept, wrestling. I ended up going to back to Puerto Rico. I ended up going back to Japan. Then I ended up going to Mexico, and I just did that for a couple of years,
right.
going back between the three of them. And then after that, um, no, before that, a couple months later, they came back to Rochester, and I was, checking out the boys because I knew them from Japan and that, and they say, "Hey, Block, how's it going?" I said, "I'm just wrestling over here and there, and I think it was Rene Goulet said, "Oh, you're a worker?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, what are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "I'm not doing anything." He says, "Well, why don't you come to Erie, PA, and I'll get you a dark match. I said, okay. So what happened was I went there, and I got a dark match. And after I got done with my dark match, Chief Strongbow came up to me.
Okay.
He was an agent there.
Right.
And let me bring you to Vince. Let me introduce you to Vince. Because he said you had a hell of a match, son, a hell of a match.
Who'd you work with?
I'm sorry?
Who'd you work with?
Not Jim Brunzell, his partner. What was his name?
Brian Blair?
Brian Blair. He said you had a hell of a good match. He says, and I heard he doesn't usually do this, right? That's what I heard. And so he brings me to Vince, and he knocks on the door. And Vince again, him and Pat, door to door, they come out together. And Chief Strongbow goes, "Did you see his match, Vince?" And Vince says, "Yeah." He's the one that jumped in the ring back in Rochester a couple years back.